Hi, I'm Carlos, and today we're going to watch our technician Shane demonstrate how to remove and replace the logic board. Now, before you get started, make sure you have all tools on hand and that you've completed the first steps outlined in the page below. The logic board and the Touch ID board are paired. When replacing one, you must replace the other. The logic board has over a dozen connectors, so allow yourself some time. Let's get started by working clockwise around the edges of the board. Remove the two T3 screws at the upper cowling of the embedded display port, or EDP cable. Then remove the cowling. Remove two T3 screws and the lower cowling at the EDP cable. Use the flat end of a black stick to disconnect the EDP cable from the T-con board. Use either tweezers or the antenna tool to grasp the head of the wireless antenna connector. Pinch the antenna tool arms, then pull the tool straight up to disconnect the antenna cable. The antenna head may disconnect forcefully, so use your other hand to soften the release and protect the antenna cable. Repeat this process for the other two wireless antenna cables. Remove the T5 antenna screw from the wireless antenna bracket. Remove the T3 screw and cowling at the touch bar 1 connector. Use the flat end of a black stick to disconnect the touch bar 1 connector. Remove the two T3 screws from the left I/O connector. Use the flat end of a black stick to disconnect the left I/O connector. Don't bend the cable past 90 degrees. Carefully lift the tab on the microphone cable. Use the flat end of a black stick to lift the locking lever. Use the pointed end of the black stick to ease the microphone flex cable from the connector. Remove the two T3 screws and the cowling at the touch bar 2 connector. Use the flat end of a black stick to disconnect the touch bar 2 connector. Rotate the computer to more easily access the left speaker cables. Lift the tab at the first left speaker cable. Then, use the flat end of a black stick to lift the locking lever. Disconnect it. Under the first speaker cable, lift the tab and release the locking lever on the second left speaker cable. Disconnect it. Rotate the computer again to remove two T3 trackpad cable screws and the cowling. Remove the battery cover. Use the flat end of a black stick to disconnect the trackpad flex cable from the logic board. Thread the trackpad flex cable through the slot in the battery cover. Reattach the battery cover. Remove two T3 screws and the cowling at the keyboard cable. Use the flat end of a black stick to disconnect the keyboard flex cable from the logic board. Rotate the computer to view the right speaker cables on the logic board. Lift the tab and use the flat end of the black stick to lift the locking lever on the speaker connector. Disconnect it. Under the first right speaker cable, lift the tab and release the locking lever on the second cable. Disconnect the second right speaker cable. Rotate the computer so that the display hinge is at the top. Remove two T3 screws at the right I/O connector. Use the pointed end of a black stick to disconnect the right I/O connector. Don't bend the cable past 90 degrees. Remove two identical T3 audio cable cowling screws and the cowling. Then, use the flat end of a black stick to disconnect the audio flex cable from the platform connector on the logic board. Use a black stick to disconnect the Touch ID flex cable. Note how the delicate flex cable routes around and under the top corner of the logic board. Slowly, slide one tip of the flathead tweezers between the Touch ID flex cable adhesive and the logic board. This loosens the adhesive bond while protecting the cable. Tuck the cable under the lip of the top case. This protects the Touch ID cable when removing the logic board. Remove 10 logic board screws. Hold the logic board by the edges while you slowly and carefully tilt up the board. Lift the board incrementally and gently move cables aside to fully remove the board from the top case. You might need to loosen the battery cover as you tilt the board. If installing a replacement logic board, refer to the service guide to transfer the heatsink, thermal ducts, and the EDP cable to the replacement board. Follow the instructions in the service guide to prepare the original board for return to Apple. Now, let's replace the logic board. Inspect the top case to make sure that the screw standoffs that surround the fans are present. If you're installing a replacement logic board, be sure to install the replacement Touch ID board in the top case. Holding the logic board by the edges, begin tilting the logic board into the top case. Move the cables into position as you slowly lower the board. Then, settle the logic board into the top case. Reinstall the 10 logic board screws. The adhesive on the Touch ID flex cable must be replaced whenever the flex cable is disconnected, even if you're installing the same logic board. Refer to the service guide for details. Starting with the Touch ID cable, work counterclockwise around the board to reconnect all cables. Reconnect the EDP flex cable to the T-Con board. Reinstall the 2 EDP flex cable cowlings and the 4 T3 cowling screws. The upper cowling uses the shorter screws. Install the remaining components in order. Refer to the service guide for detailed instructions. That's it for logic board. Thanks Shane for doing the heavy lifting. If you'd like more information, check out the page below. See you guys next time. Touch ID board. What's up? I'm Carlos, and today we're going to watch Shane, our technician, demonstrate how to remove and replace the Touch ID board. Make sure you have all tools on hand and that you've completed the first steps outlined on the page below. The Touch ID board and the logic board are paired. When replacing one, you have to replace the other. The steps for the 13-inch model and the 15-inch model differ in 2 ways: location and flex cable shape. For the 13-inch model, the Touch ID board is located directly below the display hinge in the corner of the top case. For the 15-inch model, the Touch ID board is located a bit farther from the display hinge. Also, its flex cable is shorter and underneath Mylar tape. We'll focus on the 13-inch model for this video. Start with the display closed and the computer on an ESD mat. Remove the 2 T3 screws from the center of the flexure. Remove the 4 T3 screws from the corners of the flexure. Use tweezers to remove the flexure from the top case. Open the display and stand the computer on its side. With a hand on each side of the top case, support the Touch ID board as you thread the flex cable through the slot. Remove the Touch ID board from the keyboard side of the top case. Now let's show you how to replace the Touch ID board. If you're installing a replacement Touch ID board, peel the protective film off the glass surface. Holding the long tab on the Touch ID alignment tool, check that the folded flaps are 90 degrees to the square surface. This ensures that the flaps grip the Touch ID board correctly. While holding the long tab, slide the Touch ID board inside the Touch ID alignment tool as shown. Support the tool and the board as you thread the flex cable through the slot in the top case. Make sure that the 3 flaps of the tool insert into the Touch ID bay. Hold the Touch ID alignment tool in place. Place the flexure into the top case so that the 4 silver circles are visible and the keyed edge fits the Touch ID flex cable. On the other side of the top case, hold the flexure in place as you reinstall the 4 corner screws. Remove the alignment tool and place the computer flat on the table. Press the Touch ID to check for the correct click. If the button does not move at all, or moves but doesn't click, refer to the service guide to replace the Touch ID shim. If the click is correct, place the computer on its edge and reattach the alignment tool. Gently hold the alignment tool in place and position the edge guide over the tab so it's flush with the edge of the top case. Gently hold the alignment tool in place, but don't press down. Use light downward pressure on the edge guide while reinstalling the 2 center screws in the middle of the flexure. Remove the alignment tool and the edge guide. Make sure that any disconnected cables are tucked into the top case. Then, place the computer flat on the table. Look directly over the Touch ID square. Visually verify that the spaces at each side appear equal, and the Touch ID aligns seamlessly with the touch bar. Insert the tab of the alignment tool in all four sides of the Touch ID platform. The side between the Touch ID and the touch bar has a tighter fit. The last steps include reinstalling the paired logic board. For the 13-inch model, follow the details in the service guide to connect the Touch ID flex cable and its adhesive. That's it for Touch ID. If you would like more information,